up, everybody? Welcome back to the About That podcast. My name is Chantel Millen. I am your host. If you are new here, welcome. If you are a returning visitor, welcome to you too. It's good to have you here. It's good to be back again with another opportunity to just share some good stuff from the Word of the Lord. If you didn't know, this is a place where we talk about Jesus, marriage, crafts, life, all the things. So I won't waste any time. I'll get right to it. Today we're going to look at a story. It's one of my favorites, and I think it's just because of the imagery, right? Imagining the story as it's happening. It's kind of crazy. And so anyway, we're going to look at Acts 20 verse 7 through 12. I'm going to read it in the New International Version. It says, "On the first day of the week, we came together to break bread. Paul spoke to the people, and because he intended to leave the next day, kept on talking until midnight. There were many lamps in the upstairs room where we were meeting. Seated in a window was a young man named Eutychus, who was sinking into a deep sleep as Paul talked on and on. When he was sound asleep, he fell to the ground from the third story and was picked up dead. Paul went down, threw himself on the young man, and put his arms around him. 'Don't be alarmed,' he said. 'He's alive.' Then he went upstairs again and broke bread and ate. After talking until daylight, he left. The people took the young man home alive and were greatly comforted." Okay, so imagine, right? People have walked up 3 flights of stairs. They are in a room. There's lamps, so it's well lit. Paul is talking, and it says that he's going right on and on. And while he's doing that, Eutychus is, just chilling in the windowsill, right? Not a big deal. Unless you are sleepy and on the 3rd floor. Then it's kind of a big deal, right? So it says that he falls asleep. He falls out of the window, and people rush down because that makes sense, right? They rush down, and Paul rushes down as well, and he dies. Like he dies. Paul rushes down, puts his arm around him, says, like, it's okay, he's not dead, like he's alive, right? And he lives. They go back upstairs, eat. Paul keeps talking till daylight. They take the young man home, and everyone is comforted. Crazy, right? It's a crazy story. Okay, so the first time I read this, obviously, I kind of looked at things from the point of view of Eutychus, and possible lessons and things that could be learned there. However, today, I want to share with you some lessons from the other people that are in the story. Paul, the people that ran down to help Eutychus. I want to kind of look at things just real fast from that perspective. So, first off, looking at Paul, right? It says that in Paul's speaking, Paul talked a long time. It says he spoke to the people. He intended to leave the next day. Because he intended to leave the next day, he kept talking until midnight, right? So Paul had a lot to say, and because he knew that he was needing to leave, he had to make sure that he said everything that he needed to say. Coming from a pastor, right? Me and myself and my husband tend to alternate Sundays when we preach. He'll preach one Sunday, I'll preach the next, etc. And coming from someone who understands what it is to get up and talk every other week, at minimum every other week, talking for as long as it sounds like Paul talked is a long time, right? Just doing a 15-20 minute sermon, right, it can feel like a long time in some situations, but to talk for hours, that's it's physically exhausting. I'm sure he was drained. I'm sure, if he's standing up on his feet this whole time, possibly his back is probably hurting. His legs are probably hurting. If he's sitting this whole time, his back is probably still hurting, right? His legs might have fallen asleep if he's been sitting this whole time. He's probably potentially going hoarse if he's been talking for hours. You are dealing with clearly people who are tired in the audience, right? Again, if you are a preacher, you may or may not know what it feels like to be preaching a sermon and see people resting in the Lord, if you will, as you're speaking. And I get it, because church can be a very peaceful place, and sometimes that's the only peace that people experience, like, in their week. So, like, I get it. But nevertheless, as the person speaking, to see potentially disinterest, to see potentially distraction, to see not even potentially sleepiness, because Eutychus clearly went to sleep, right? It's a lot. But despite all of that, Paul was still obedient to do what he needed to do, despite the discomfort, despite his own tiredness, despite everything that he's witnessing in front of him with the people that are listening, their tiredness, their distraction, etc., etc. He was still obedient. Obedience despite discomfort is a place that we all hopefully get to. And it can be a journey, because obedience is real easy when, and I think we talked about this a couple weeks ago, when it's not real sacrificial, it's kind of easy to be obedient. But when it's discomfort involved, when it's sacrificial, that's when the obedience is like, whew, all right, let's do this, right? Got to kind of hype yourself up, get it done. And so learning that obedience despite discomfort, learning that obedience despite what others think, what others look like, how others react or respond, learning that I've still got to do what it is that the Lord has told me to do. I've still got to say what it is the Lord has told me to say. I still need to be where it is that the Lord has told me to be, right? Despite whatever is in my surroundings, or despite whatever is in my environment, despite what my circumstances might be, despite how I might feel about it, physically, mentally, emotionally, all the things, obedience, still necessary, right? And so then we get to looking into Paul's reaction to when Eutychus fell. So, in that moment, the possible choice, quick couple second choice, to maybe be a little salty, maybe be a little petty, right? When Eutychus fell out the window. Because think about it. Like, if he's sitting there preaching, it wasn't like Eutychus just went from like alive and perky and listening to asleep, right? We all know there's a process to getting that deep into sleep. There's some like slow blinks that happen. There's some nodding of the head that happens, probably several times. You know what I mean? There's some, long nods of the head that kind of wake you up. Maybe there was a little bit of snoring and somebody might have had to, hey, like, wake up. Like, all of these things likely had to happen before he got into deep sleep. And Paul likely witnessed them happening as he's preaching, right? And so when Eutychus falls out the window, there may or may not have been just a quick moment of, that's what you get, right? Just a slight moment of saltiness, of pettiness. Maybe, maybe not. Either way, it says that quickly he went down, right, to where Eutychus was. And even in that, right, I had to remind myself that There will be moments in life when we may come across people who may, right, do something, say something, that may make us feel like we have the right to be a little petty, the right to be a little salty. Especially when we are then expected to help that person, then expected to comfort or encourage, or whatever the case might be, right? In that moment, we have to make a choice whether to represent Christ well or to act ungodly, right? To go deeper into our pettiness and our saltiness and just say, yeah, nope, not helping, right? And so Paul didn't do that. It says he went down and he threw his arms around him and said, don't be afraid, he's alive, right? When people fall, when they sin, when they backslide, when they make a mistake, when they reject Christ, like whatever the case might be, we have to not ridicule, not judge. He could have went down and said, that's what you get, right? If you'd have been awake, you wouldn't have fallen out the window, right? This is your fault. This is on you. He could have done all of those things. But we have to do what Paul did. Throw our arms around them in whatever situation they're in and declare that they're going to be okay. Let them know that they can live again in Christ. Let them know that there is life, that there is forgiveness, that there is hope, that there is renewal, that there is a future, that there is potential for them, that there is still a life to be lived, that the Lord loves them, like all the things, right? The judgment, the ridicule, most times people are doing that to themselves. They don't need us to do it too, right? They need us to say, man, like the Lord loves you, right? And no matter what this situation looks like, he still loves you and he still wants you. He still wants relationship with you and he forgives, right? We have to just embrace them in every way. Embrace them. And lastly, I told you I'd be quick. Thinking about those who went down, right, to pick him up, because it says that some people went down to pick him up, and when they picked him up, he was dead, right? And then Paul came in and threw his arms around him. But for the ones that came and picked him up, they could have made a different decision. So biblically, it says that they picked him up, Paul threw his arms around him, said, don't be afraid, he's alive. And then it says that they went back up, ate, Paul continued to talk, and then when Paul left, then everybody left, right? Went home and were comforted. Okay? Which means Eutychus went back up too, right? So the choice that could have been made, and it's one that sometimes we might make because we think we're helping, is once he had fallen, he's alive, they could have chosen to take him home. They could have said, like, clearly he needs to rest. Clearly he is tired. Whatever. So we just need to just take him home and, make sure he's okay. Right? But instead, they didn't do that. They were like, okay, he's alive. Let's go back up. Because up here, we are hearing from the Lord. Up here, we are receiving the message that is being given to us, right? And so once all of that is done, then we'll go home. Listen, as good as it is to help others, as great as it is to help others, as godly as it is to help others, we enter a dangerous place when we begin to prioritize helping others over our relationship with the Lord, right? If I'm spending more of my time helping, and I am decreasing my time or hindering my time with the Lord, right? My worship with him, my prayer time with him, my study time with him, my time to just be in his presence, whatever, that is not what should be happening, right? We can't give out what we don't have. And sometimes, unfortunately, we can find ourselves doing that, especially for those who might be like myself, right? Where we are pastors, where we are also deeply involved in social services, right? And so we are meeting needs every day, and people are coming needing, clothing and food and rent assistance, and things are happening with their children, and things are happening in their families and their marriages, and like the needs are always present, and the desire to help meet those needs is also always present. But we have to know and recognize, when do I need to stop, pause, right? Have I gotten so deeply involved in helping others that I've begun to neglect myself, right? And neglect my relationship with the Lord. Here, they were happy to help you. They were happy to run to his rescue to make sure that in the emergency, he was okay. And then when he was, it wasn't let's take him home. It was let's go back up, right? Because before this happened, I was receiving, right, everything that the Lord was saying to me. And I need to make sure that I get the rest of it. And then we'll make sure that everybody gets home, right? So yeah, I told you it was going to be quick. It was going to be fast. Because it's not real difficult. Like, it's not like a real difficult or deep, perhaps, message. However, I do, at least for myself, recognize the relevancy, especially in this time of year where, for many of us, we are entering the Christmas season, where, we're looking at getting gifts and creating parties and, prepping for Christmas services and Christmas plays, and, like, all the things are happening. And so, again, taking time to remember what the season is about, who the season is about, and allowing ourselves to celebrate that from a personal place, allowing ourselves to connect to that from a personal place, and making that just as much a priority as we do all of the helping and serving things in this season, I think are very important. So when you get time, go, read the story again, see what it is perhaps that the Lord would share with you from any of those points of views. But just a quick recap. 1, remembering to be obedient despite discomfort. 2, when someone falls, it's not our job to ridicule and judge, but it's our job to throw our arms around them, to embrace them and show love, to give encouragement, to share the heart of the Lord with them. And lastly, to remember that we can't give out to other people what we don't have. And so to ensure that we are not prioritizing helping and serving and neglecting our own time and relationship with Jesus. So I love you guys. Can I say that? Yeah. I love you with the love of the Lord. And I pray that this, as I do with everything, is encouraging and uplifting to you. As I say all the time, like, share, subscribe, do all of the social media things. Go to the website, theforeverfused.com, because again, I just love hearing from you and sharing all the things that the Lord has for me to share. So if you can't hear, my son is in the background screaming he's done because he just finished his cereal. So I'm going to go get him. So until next time, this is about that, and that's a wrap. Have a good one.